This is Sports Talk, home to great debates and the hottest sports topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeremy Farina, Justin Paolillo, and Holden Pirelli.
Hello and welcome, North Haven. I'm Holden Pirelli, and this is Justin Paolillo. Welcome to Sports Talk. Jeremy Farina is out tonight. He's rehearsing for Mr. North Haven, which is at the high school tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the evening. Justin and I will be there filming. Jeremy will be performing. But on to our first topic. LeBron James has recently been reported to have been calling plays all season on the offensive end of the floor for the Cavs in place of head coach David Blatt. Justin, is this a good move or bad decision for the Cavs? Does this look good or bad for the Cavs?
I think it depends because, you bring in Coach David Blatt. Obviously, they made that decision before LeBron did sign with the team. So David Blatt was under the impression that I'm coaching Kyrie Irving, whoever the number one pick is, either Wiggins or Jabari. Rumors to get Love, but he thought he was going to get a pretty young team and he was going to have to be calling the plays. And then they do a whole 360 or 180. They sign LeBron, best player on the planet, and then they make the Wiggins trade to get Love. And when you get LeBron James, he's a point forward. He plays any position on the floor, and he's going to be running your point a lot of the times. And with that, you're going to get a lot of play calling. However, I think that could be him making a lot of the play calls could be some of the reasons why David Blatt has been on the hot seat as of late earlier this season when the team was struggling a little bit. So I think it's a good thing now that the team's winning because, look, if the team's winning, you got to keep it up, whatever you're doing. If that means LeBron James is calling every play, you do that if that means winning games. But as far as for David Blatt in the future moving forward and the team as a whole, I don't know how good of a move this is because let's say LeBron stays this year or next year and maybe he leaves or even if he stays, what are you going to do after that? He's gone. David Blatt has not much experience with the team. Is he just going to step right in? Obviously they're expecting LeBron to stay for pretty much the rest of his career, but this also could be like a little sign for the future saying, I don't think David Blatt is the long-term option. Maybe they're thinking, LeBron will be the coach now, and maybe we'll go after. I don't want to say
Jackson.
Yeah, I don't want to say Mike D'Antoni because I don't know how that would work out. But maybe like a guy like Mark Jackson, or maybe if somebody else good gets fired this year, who knows? But it's good if the team's winning. But I just think this shows that David Blatt isn't the long-term future for this Cleveland Cavs organization. But if they keep winning games, it's fine by me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Justin. If they're winning games now, don't fix it if it isn't broken. And this is a good idea for the Cavs in the short term because you have a coach like David Blatt who's never had any experience playing professional basketball in the NBA or as a coach in the NBA. He's a complete novice. He's still learning how to be a coach in the NBA. So when you have a player like LeBron James, who's the best player in the world, and he's played for over a decade in the league, you're going to lean on him for some advice in tough situations, and I think it's a good idea for LeBron to call plays because he's a great basketball player. He's a smart basketball player. He's a point forward. Now, if this was a team like Rick Carlisle, like Dallas Mavericks, they had a situation between Rick Carlisle and Rondo because Rondo was so used to calling plays in Boston. Then he gets to Dallas, and Rick Carlisle wants to call plays, and there's conflict there, and they're obviously struggling. But Rick Carlisle is an experienced coach, and he's credible. And his opinions are valid because he's won a championship. Whereas with David Blatt, he really has no credentials besides being a successful coach in Europe. So I'm going to go with calling plays for LeBron. LeBron needs to call plays for the Cavs right now because they have no coaching experience on that team. David Blatt's a great offensive mind. He's still getting his feet wet, and you have a ton of weapons on that team. And when LeBron has the basketball and he's calling plays, he's obviously trying to facilitate for other players. And I think the other players are happy about that because Kevin Love wants more opportunities to score. So does Kyrie. Both guys are scorers. This is a great chance for the Cavs in the short term.
Exactly.
But moving on to our next topic, we're going to transition to the NFL for a moment. Tony Romo recently said to reporters that he would have taken a $5 million pay cut in order for the Cowboys to sign DeMarco Murray. Hearing this kind of information recently, Justin, should Dallas have made more of an effort to keep DeMarco?
I don't think so. I mean, DeMarco Murray is a great running back, and he was on this show specifically. I think I picked him, and I think Holden picked him up. I think one of the times we did our MVP picks for the MVP of last season, and it's tough because do you keep the guy, or do you go for a guy like Adrian Peterson, or do you try to stack up your defense because you have such a great offensive line and NBK run? So it's a good sign that Tony Romo's taking a pay cut here, but I think it was just not bad blood with DeMarco Murray. But what do you think was going through his head the whole offseason when all the debates were, do you keep Dez or do you keep Murray? What is that doing for his self-esteem when obviously every person in the media is saying you keep Dez Bryant, and then they franchise him so he's there? I just don't think it would have worked out in the long term, especially if they can get a guy like Adrian Peterson. If Tony Romo were to take a pay cut now, and they did get Hardy to improve their defense, so I just think the team. I think they benefited from losing Murray because I don't think, sure, Murray's a great running back, but I think it was that offensive line that really helped him a lot. And we'll see how he does with the Eagles. But obviously their offensive line is not as good as the Cowboys is, but I think the offensive line kind of made Murray last year. So I think they wanted to move in a different direction by getting their better defensive players and obviously signing Dez Bryant long term. So I don't think they should have made a push for him. I think it all worked out fine for them, especially if Tony Romo is still willing to take a pay cut now, maybe in the future if they could sign even more pieces. So I think it was smart what they did, not taking pay cuts or going all in for Murray. So I think it was a good strategy. But I like the willingness of Tony Romo to take a pay cut in order to win a Super Bowl for his team because he realizes he's not getting any younger and he needs to win soon, or else he's going to be known as the 8-8 quarterback for the rest of his career. So good move by both Tony Romo and the team.
Yeah, I think this was an interesting comment by Tony Romo that he would have taken a pay cut to keep DeMarco Murray. At the same time, you have to consider that Tony Romo is one of the more overpaid quarterbacks in the NFL. This guy got $55 million in guaranteed money, which is outrageous considering his playoff resume and the lack of Super Bowls with the Cowboys recently. But I think there's so much talent on that offense in Dallas that you can live without DeMarco. That offensive line with 3 All-Pros, that offensive line, I mean, we were talking about the other day, Nicky Rags could be an all-star running back.
Could be an all-pro running back.
Yeah, all-pro running back for that team. That offensive line is just so talented in Dallas that I think that if they draft a guy or sign a veteran on the free agent market, he can have just as much success or close to it as DeMarco. Now,
and they have Randall come.
And DeMarco's 27. Like, he's probably got 2 or 3 years before his body starts breaking down. And I'd rather draft a guy and have him for 5 years than have DeMarco for only 2 good years. Maybe 2 good years. And this is coming off a year with 392 carries. And we've seen with guys who've averaged over 350 yards carry in a season, the following season they totally collapsed. Just think of Larry Johnson. He had over 400 carries one season in Kansas, and the following season he only played in 2 games. So this is very serious when you consider DeMarco Murray's situation. I think he went, good riddance. Not saying good riddance, but, the Dallas Cowboys don't really need him, and they have needs elsewhere, especially on defense if they want to be a Super Bowl contender. So I think Romo saying something like this, it's great to hear. It's nice to hear because you're being humble about yourself and you're sort of admitting that what you make is an outrageous sum for the production that you produce. But I don't think Dallas really needed to keep DeMarco. They needed to keep Dez.
I agree, Holden. Just good move.
Moving on to our next topic, Jameis Winston recently had his pro day on Tuesday. The Florida State quarterback completed over 100 passes at his pro day, projected on most mock drafts to go number 1 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Justin, after seeing all these mock drafts, hearing how great he was at his pro day, is he a lock to be the number 1 pick?
I think at this point he is. I think with Mariota, for example, who I think before the national championship or the playoffs, I think Mariota and him were just they were almost neck and neck at that point. There was what does Tampa Bay want more? And I think the fact that Mariota, not that he didn't show up in the national championship, but he didn't play Mariota-esque football. So I think just with the performance by Winston in his recent pro day, and just in general, how the talent of Jameis Winston, I think he's definitely a lock for number one at this point. The only thing like I've mentioned before on the show, the only thing that I think could keep him back from being the number one pick is if the Buccaneers are concerned about his off-field problems. But I think Winston will shape up once he sees what it's like. There's a lot of veterans on that team, and they're not going to let him get away with any nonsense. They're gonna really mentor him, and I think it's going to be a good fit for him. Good receivers there, good veteran receivers there in Vincent Jackson. So I think he's definitely a lock going number one, and I guess we'll see how it goes. But I will almost guarantee that his name will be called to the Buccaneers on draft night.
Yeah, I definitely think that Jameis Winston's going number one, barring that he gets into an off-the-field issue yet again. But when you look at the other quarterbacks in this draft, Marcus Mariota is a very raw talent. He hasn't had a lot of experience in a pro-style offense and as a pure drop-back pocket passer in college, whereas Jameis Winston has had 2 full years of being in a pro system and dropping back and flinging the football. Jameis Winston's body of work is impressive. He's a winner. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a national championship winner. This guy's really never experienced much loss in his life. He's got supreme confidence. He excelled at his pro day like most quarterbacks do, but he really nailed it. And if he goes to Tampa, he's got a bunch of weapons. Doug Martin, Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans. He's got a stud defense, a good coaching staff. Everything is there for him to be a successful quarterback. And I think that Tampa's looking to win now, especially in a weak division with New Orleans on the decline. Carolina's always iffy, and Atlanta is always iffy as well. So I think that division's for the taking, and they're looking for a pro-style quarterback. When have you ever seen a Super Bowl contending team without a legitimate quarterback who can throw from the pocket? You just don't see it that often. San Francisco is really the only team with Colin Kaepernick that are legitimate contenders, where Kaepernick is not a legitimate pocket passer. Otherwise, all the other quarterbacks in the league that are on good teams are good pocket passers. And Tampa, I think Jameis Winston's the only guy who can have success from the pocket in this year's draft, and I think they're going to take him.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Holden. I don't think the Buccaneers want to mess around with a raw talent like Mariota, possibly have him maybe sit out for a year or two. I don't think they want to wait that long. I think they want to win now or maybe next year. And look, their receivers, they're on the older side, so I think you definitely want to get a young quarterback in there who's ready to throw to him. And I really like what you said about the weak division. This is the time to win. I mean, we don't need the Panthers or Saints getting any better. So let's say you draft Mariota, and 3 years from now you're contenders because he's ready to go. Maybe the Panthers made some moves, or the Saints made some moves, or the Falcons made some moves.
It's a win now league.
You got to win now.
You got to take it while it's there.
And Winston's not going to be done after 2 years. Exactly. He's going to be a long-term option as well.
He's going to be, if he pans out, he's going to be there for the next decade.
So exactly. I think Winston will definitely be on the Bucs.
All right,
this
Justin.
coming season.
Well, we're done discussing football. Back to basketball, which I know you love with all your passion. But the McDonald's All-American game is on tonight in Chicago. Obviously, the best of the best in high school basketball, meeting up in Chicago to throw down. Seeing this game, I always watch this game, Justin, and there's so many talented players. It just makes you think: should high school players be allowed to declare immediately for the draft instead of doing 1 year in college?
Well, Holden, this one has always been a little mind boggler for me because you see the talent that comes out of high school. LeBron James, what's his name? Kevin Garnett, Al Jefferson. The list goes on and on. David West coming out of high school. Garnett, yeah. Dwight Howard came out of high school. Josh Smith came out of high school. Kobe Bryant came out of high school. But then you look at guys like, for example, you remember Shabazz Muhammad on the Timberwolves?
Yeah.
Coming out of high school.
He was like the number 2 guy, right?
Number 2 guy, and I have a feeling if they had the rule where you can come right out of high school, he probably would have gone top 15,
5, right?
Top 10,
and
he would have probably been a bust.
He kind of
just fell off, and I'm sure Wiggins would have been
number 1.
I'm sure he would have been high up as well, and maybe Jabari Parker as well. Obviously, I think Wiggins will be a great player. The other thing you got to look at is too. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, go to college, so if you do get hurt, you have something to fall back on." But I mean, unless you're a guy like Shabazz Napier or a Draymond Green, you're only going for 1 year, and half of that season you're away on the road playing basketball. If your team goes to the Final Four, they're not at school right now. They're getting ready to win basketball games. So, yeah, you might get a. Do you know if they get some kind of degree for going a year, or do you know how that works?
No, it's just 1 year.
It's just 1 year. You can't get a degree.
I think Rick,
and you're not in the.
You just mentioned it. Rick Pitino, the coach at Louisville, was talking about this, whether high school players should be allowed to immediately declare for the draft, and he supports it because he frankly thinks, college basketball players, they're not at college a majority of the year. They take 6 to 7 months of online courses because they're on the road playing basketball games, especially if you're going deep into the tournament in March and April.
By the time they get back, the school year ends in May.
Right. So he really doesn't see what good it does to take 6 to 7 months of online courses and then go right to the pros.
And you're not getting any degree for it.
What kind of educational value are you getting? And this is interesting because I don't even think that they should be allowed to declare right out of high school. I think they should change the rules for how long they should stay in college.
Maybe 3-4 years.
I think, honestly, like the NFL that requires acquires people who want to play in the league to do at least 3 years of college. It lets them develop mentally and physically, maturity-wise. I think if guys like Jameis Winston were to stay all 4 years, obviously he's only doing 3, he'd be a lot
and you could still get your degree in 3 years if you take extra courses.
So I think players should be allowed to stay. It should be mandated to do 3 years in college because you grow as a person, you mature and develop, and you also mature and develop physically. A lot of these players, like Willie Cauley-Stein, his freshman year, he was a backup on Kentucky. If he declared, they were like, oh, he's going to be like a late second rounder and not even drafted at all. His sophomore season, he finally gets to start. Now he's like a late first round pick / second round pick. Now he's a full-time starter on an undefeated team, and in some mock drafts, if he declares today, some people have him being a top 5 lottery pick. That's crazy. That just shows you the benefits of staying in college in terms of your NBA stock.
And look at Draymond Green. I mean, he didn't get drafted very high, but this guy's getting paid this offseason because look how he's the starting power forward on the best team in the NBA.
Right.
And he did that with hard work. His maturity level is high. A lot of the thing is, too, NBA teams, they're not big on taking 22-year-old rookies because it's nice taking an 18-year-old guy who you can mentor for 3 years, and then when he's 21, he's possibly an all-star already. Yeah. But
But, I mean, you just look at Willie Cauley-Stein.
He's a good example.
Being in college for 3 years, he's developed physically. Like, I watch him, and he looks a lot bigger and stronger than the kind of player he was his freshman year at Kentucky. And now he's reaping the benefits of it because his draft stock is at an all-time high. And NBA contracts are only for, 3-4 years? So you can, if you do 4 years at college and then you declare for the draft, you do your 3 years in the pros, you pan out well, you can cash in still at a pretty relatively young age. Like
especially
Draymond
in the NBA,
Green
you could play to 35.
Is probably going to get the max from somebody, and he's only 25
or
years
good
old.
Money.
Yeah, or good money. He's only 25, so he can cash in on a 4-year deal and then cash in again. I mean, there are some benefits for guys to stay in college, like Harrison Barnes, Draymond Green, possibly Willie Cauley-Stein. These are some of the guys that have stayed multiple years in college and are reaping the benefits. And there are so many players who have only done 1 year, like Archie Goodwin at Kentucky.
Otto Porter Jr.
Yeah, Otto Porter Jr.
He's a good player.
These guys were McDonald's All-Americans, highly recruited out of high school, only did 1 year in the pros, didn't really pan out or have a lot of success. Then they declared for the draft, and now you don't even know who they are.
I think this topic has so many aspects to it because, I can name 6 different things that would make sense, but there's always a downside to them. Like, for example, one thing that comes to mind is, let's say we draft people like Wiggins right out of high school. I think it makes the college game much better because you have teams in the NCAA tournament who have been there, who their teams have played 4 years of basketball, and there's a lot of seniors on the team. I think it would make college basketball so much better because people wouldn't be trying to make the pros or trying to hire their draft stock. People would just be playing for their school, and I think the game of college basketball would be better. Right. But then you look at it too, well, then you got guys coming out of high school who maybe are not necessarily ready. And then you also could look at guys who are busts coming out of high school.
Right.
There's just so many factors to it. And then you look at maybe, let's say Anthony Davis stayed 2 years at Kentucky or 3 years at Kentucky. What if he tears his ACL playing?
Exactly, like Nerlens Noel popped his ACL, Jabari finally got to the pros and popped his ACL?
What if you tear it in college and you're done? Right. There's just many.
There's so many pros and cons, and that's why I think like it's different for every guy. Some guys are literally physically ready to come out right out of high school and play in the NBA and hold their own. Guys like Andrew Wiggins or Julius Randle, like they've developed physically and they have like man bodies and they can go right into the league and dish it out. But then there are some guys like Willie Cauley-Stein, Frank Kaminsky, guys like J.J. Redick, who coming out of high school haven't really physically developed, and they use those 3-4 years to bulk up. And by the time they make it to the league, they can hold their own against these big athletes. I want to see Willie Cauley-Stein succeed. I think if he declared for the draft after his freshman year, he'd be in the D League somewhere. But now he has a legitimate shot to be on a 12-man roster
and win a
an
national
NBA
championship.
Team. Yeah. So it's different. I agree with you. It's really hard to justify how to go about this
because there's pros and cons to both.
There's pros and cons to every single situation, and it's different.
But
for
I think
every
the
single
current
player.
thing they have now is, I don't think it's a very good system because you're not getting your degree if you go to college.
Yeah.
People aren't even people don't even care about the college season half the time. They're just ready to go to the NBA. Sure, you want to win a national title, but if you're there 4 years. You have 4 years to go, develop as a team, you build a team around your one player, and you could win a national title. You had a chance all 4 years. And what does it do 1 year?
Right.
People don't want to be there, and they're not getting their degree.
I think some people in good faith said, we know there's a bunch of kids who want to come right out of high school.
Yeah.
So just having 1 year, you only have to make, trudge it through 1 year if you're just all about declaring for the draft. But they're also giving kids the opportunity for 1 year to really decide whether or not they want to go to the pros.
It could give me a wake-up call. Maybe I'm not that good at basketball.
Maybe John Smith, who's like a 6'8", small forward with like a 4.4 40 time, who's just a tremendous athlete. He's like, I want to go right to the pros. But then he gets this opportunity to do 1 year in college and, figures, hey, I want to stay here for a couple more years. I'm having a good time. Like, I want to live it while it's good. Then he's there for 4 years, and he has a scholarship and all the opportunities.
It makes sense to be there,
and then he can still go
yeah.
to the pros. So it's really different. I think it's different for every single player, every single family. But I think having a 1 year thing, it's really just trying to find some sort of compromise. I mean, Charles Barkley wants to do 2 years because he thinks, only 1 year, you're not really teaching these kids the fundamentals of basketball.
I think there's got to be a way for the people to get their degrees if they want to, because it's just like you see, and if you look at it too, a lot of guys who don't go to college, 60% of NBA players are bankrupt after 5 years of leaving the league because they don't gain any. Allen Iverson went bankrupt after 1 year at Georgetown or after the NBA.
And then you look at like these players like J.J. Redick, who are average players, average to good, and they can still they're making money off the court. Like
and I'm sure they'll be. And I'm sure
they're smart. They're savvy. They've been to college for 4 years.
So I think maturity is a big deal. I almost think it should be up to the players because. Look, if they want to go to the NBA and risk being in the D League or not having anything to fall back on, that's their decision. But if they want to go to college for 4 years, that's their decision. If they want to leave after a year, they want to stay, I think it should be up to the players personally. But you could make the argument maybe they're not mature enough to make that decision. So, like you said, Holden, there's pros and cons to both sides, to every aspect of this call. But
exactly. I mean,
there's really no right way.
God, it's just such a tough question because really everyone has their own special case. And like you said, Justin, some guys, like, they're just, they in high school, highly touted players, highly recruited. They do their year in college or their multiple years in college, have tremendous success. Then they get to the pros and they still get schmacked. Like, just think of Fab Melo.
Fab Melo, good example, yeah.
Highly recruited out of high school, tremendous college player, didn't really pan out in the pros.
Didn't do anything in the pros.
Think of Christian Laettner,
Back then, people stayed 3-4 years,
right?
Nobody really came out after their first year.
There's so many players who have also done, walked both paths. Highly recruited out of high school, tremendous success.
And they see the money in the NBA.
Play.
Like, think about it. Say you're a senior next year.
Yeah.
Let's say you have the opportunity to make millions the following year to play the sport you love.
Right.
That sounds great. And people don't see that. I could get hurt. I could not make the team. What do I fall back on?
But
Nothing.
This is the thing I would worry about, right? I can come right out of high school. If I don't have success immediately, I'm going to be playing somewhere in Iowa
or not even, D League, or team. Like playing in Europe or something.
Yeah. Or do I want to do a couple of years in college, beef up my game, beef up my body, and have a better chance rather than coming out as a 19-year-old kid, 18, 19-year-old kid, haven't really developed pretty raw playing against, because everyone, when you're recruited out of high school, you're better than everybody in high school. The high school level is so different from college, and then college is so different from the NBA. Once you get to college and the NBA, everyone is good. Everyone was Mr. Ohio or
when you play
Mr. California, Gatorade Player of the Year. It's just different levels. You can't look at a guy out of North Haven and be like, man, he was all SEC, he was all state, so he must be a stud. Let's send him right to the draft. But then he's playing with five other guys
who are in a better conference.
Who are in a better conference, in a better, environment to play basketball, and they were all Mr. Connecticut's or New York's or stuff like that, and you're getting your butt handed to you.
To just wrap this up very quickly, the only thing I just don't understand what the 1 year of college does. I just think that needs to be changed somehow, because what's the difference between 1 year in college and coming at, you don't get a degree, sure you might get a little physically better, but I don't think there's any.
I think it's meant to satisfy both ends of the spectrum. For the guys who just think about coming right out of high school, it's like, all right, I'll just make it through 1 year. Just 12 months.
But what does that do? You're not doing anything in college.
Opportunity to,
if you bomb out in the NBA, you can't, and you go to apply to a job. Oh well, I went to 1 year at Kentucky. Does that do anything for you?
That's why these guys who do this 1 year, they're expecting just to be basketball players like the rest of their lives, make enough money that they don't have to work a single day for the rest of their lives after they retired. And I remember hearing an interesting quote from, I forget what athlete it was. I think it was Charles Barkley. I'm not sure, but he said most of these guys who play in the NBA or the NFL, once they retire, they don't know what to do.
Exactly, because they don't.
Because they expect that they're going to make enough money that they can live, happily the rest of their lives. And a lot of these guys, that's why they go bankrupt, because they're like, I want to maintain the quality of life I had when I was making $5 million a year, but now I'm only making $0.
But I have
a bunch of monies in savings. But how long can I live the $5 million life with my savings? That's why a lot of these guys
like you were saying, Holden, there's really, no matter what option you go down, there's going to be bad parts and there's going to be good parts.
I want to keep my 3 houses. But wait, I don't make $5 million anymore. So how long can I keep my 3 houses? Maybe for 5 more years? With my savings,
it's just so tough. I guess you have to compromise somewhere, but I just think, I don't know. It's just so confusing. Or maybe NBA or high school players can maybe have some sort of NBA tryout just to see how they would do in the NBA game. I don't know, because it's
what's a specialized combine.
So let's say we give the high schoolers, all whatever you want to do, you do. We're not requiring you to college. We're not doing anything. They should have a choice to go to try out for a team. And let's say they get caught or they hate it, they could have an opportunity to go to college. I think it shouldn't just. I think the only fair way is really to leave it up to the players. But there's cons to that as well. So it's just so tough.
Exactly. Well, we've beaten this topic to death, I think.
Yeah.
It's definitely still a controversial issue. You can go up to anybody and they'll have a different opinion. But moving on to our next topic, thinking about high school athletes, college athletes. The Final Four is coming up. It is going to be Kentucky versus Wisconsin and Michigan State versus Duke. Justin, who do you have in these 2 matchups?
The Wisconsin-Duke is going to be a great game. I'm sorry, Kentucky-Wisconsin is going to be a great game. What I noticed about the Notre Dame game was, if you look in Kentucky, they've never really had to play their starters more than 10 or 15 minutes a game. And against Notre Dame, they've never been in a situation where they've actually had to put up those
go into
the half tide or come down to the final minutes and have to run plays that you need a bucket on.
Play scenario.
A lot of times your bench is out there with the whole second half.
Exactly.
And I think that could come down. That could be a deciding factor against Wisconsin if Frank the Tank goes off and Wisconsin keeps it close the whole game and guys on Kentucky aren't used to playing in these tight games. I think Wisconsin has the edge. But if you're looking at just sheer talent and the amount of talent they have on that team, you have to pick Kentucky here. But I'm going with Wisconsin pulling the upset here. I think Wisconsin has just been that team this year. It's Kaminsky's last year, So I think he's definitely got something to prove because he's a mid pick. So he's
Right.
like a 15 to 20 pick in the NBA.
Well,
I think
see a lot of Dirk in Frank.
I do see a lot of Dirk, and I think if he could
Right.
win a national title, beat Kentucky, I think his draft stock only goes up. And then if you look at Michigan State, Duke, I got to go with Duke here. Michigan State's been on a roll, and they're always good in the tournament. But I mean, if you got the best player in college basketball right now in Okafor playing for you, and you got a great captain in what's his name
for Duke.
Yeah,
Quinn Cook.
Quinn Cook. That's another guy. Played 4 years. I don't know how it turned out, but
pan out in the pros very well. But hey, a lot of people said
great
that
in
about
college.
Draymond
Exactly.
Michigan State.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Duke, Wisconsin to make the finals, and we'll see what they do next Monday.
Exactly. I mean, this is a great Final Four. Kentucky and Wisconsin. I wanted to mention this, but I didn't want to interrupt you. They're playing each other for the second straight Final Four.
Yep.
They played each other last year.
And they got something to prove.
Kentucky beat Wisconsin by, I think, 1 point to go on and play UConn. They obviously lost. But I think in this matchup, Wisconsin has some NBA players. Like Sam Decker. He played at LeBron's camp over the summer. LeBron obviously saw something in the kid. He's like a 6'9" small forward, which is great. Because that's like the average height of the small forward in today's league.
6'8", 6'9".
Yeah. And then you have Frank Kaminsky, who's like, good comparison, Dirk, but you wonder if he's going to be like a Christian Laettner kind of thing.
So he has the ceiling to be Dirk, but he could end up like...
But Wisconsin, this is a veteran squad. They've been through the battles, and they've been through the tournament multiple times. A lot of these players are returners. I think they could give Kentucky a good run for their money, considering Notre Dame came down to the wire against Kentucky as well. But I think Kentucky's going to win out because they just have too much talent. I think when it comes postseason time, it's really not how good your starting five is. It's how good your bench five is and what kind of production you can get off your bench. And Kentucky has a McDonald's All-American bench. Okay,
Their bench could beat some starting lineups.
They can go 10 deep because they have studs all over that roster. Kyle Wiltshire, who's he was on Gonzaga. They just lost to Duke. Who's a candidate for Player of the Year in college basketball. He started his career at Kentucky before he transferred to Gonzaga. Like, that's just how much talent Kentucky has. And I think they're just going to wear you down. Like, you're going to be playing your starting five probably the whole game for Wisconsin. Maybe 2 or 3 minute breaks for guys. And Kentucky is going to keep guys fresh and just keep coming at you and just throwing in guys who've only played like 5-minute sets.
They're ready to go.
They're just going to wear you down with their fresh legs, and I think Kentucky's going to win out. And Duke, Michigan State is interesting to me because I think Duke wins if Jahlil Okafor shows up. If he does not play well for them... He didn't show up last game. Yeah, if he does not play well for them in this game, Michigan State is a physical team. They love to rebound. They love to get out in transition, and they love to outmuscle you. So I think if Jahlil Okafor gets doubled and taken out of the game, Michigan State wins this. Tom Izzo is probably one of the best coaches in college basketball, and this Michigan State team, I don't think even deserved to be in the tournament, in my opinion, considering, well, some pundits say they had a really tough record, and that's why they got in, because they were able to have a lot of success with that tough record, but they weren't a ranked team in the AP poll coming into the tournament. And I definitely think that Michigan State, come postseason, they always seem to pull it together and have a lot of success, and that comes down to the coaching staff and Tom Izzo. He really does a great job inspiring guys to play well in the most important moments, and I think they do it again against Duke because Duke, frankly, doesn't have a bench at all. They've been just relying on Jahlil Okafor to carry them all the way to the Final Four, and I think finally he's bound to have a bad game at some point, and I think Michigan State's going to give it to him. So I have them winning, Michigan State winning, Kentucky winning, and then meeting in the finals. I think we should save that for last show, though, because obviously we don't know.
Well, that'll be
going to go down.
Wait, we have to make our picks today because we'll know.
All right, you want to make our picks?
Because it'll be after.
All right, so you're saying Wisconsin, Duke?
No, Wisconsin and Duke, and you have the opposite.
And I have Kentucky, Michigan State. So Wisconsin, Duke, who wins?
So I gotta go with Wisconsin here. I just think it's their year. It's going to be a great game.
Yeah,
I mean, any one of these four teams has the opportunity to win.
Right.
There's no
Wisconsin,
underdog
that's not
here.
a bad choice at all. They have so many veterans, so many successful players, great coach, and they've just been on a magical run all year long. I think they're like the Spurs of last year. They lost in the Elite Eight, and they're just. They lost in the Final Four, and they're looking to.
They're hungry.
They're hungry for this title. But I think, in my opinion, Kentucky wins this year. They're just too deep. They have so many talented players that they can just throw the kitchen sink at you. And if one guy's having a bad night, we have 3 other guys who can have a good night. So I think Kentucky wins the national title this year.
Hold on, before we move on to that final topic that you have there, I just have 2 questions to ask you. One's in the NBA, one's in the MLB. I'll start with the NBA to keep it with basketball, but I'll ask this: what team do you think can go from 0 to hero? Not necessarily bottom, not necessarily a team like the Knicks or 76ers.
Make a late run to make the playoffs?
Oh no, for next season. Let's talk about a team that's not a championship contender by any means.
So they could turn it around next season.
Yeah,
and be a contender.
even a playoff team who you don't think is ready, that will be a championship that you think is most likely to be a championship contender next year.
This is a tough question.
Do you want to get my input first? And
I would say this is tough.
This
is a tough question.
List a couple teams you think will be.
I would say I'm tempted to say the Knicks, but it really just depends on how well they do in free agency.
On the draft lottery.
They're going to get a lottery pick, and I think they're going to take either Jahlil Okafor or Karl Anthony Towns. They have Carmelo coming back, but he's coming off that knee injury. I don't know how he's going to be. They really need to tackle free agency aggressively and sign 1 or 2, max star-esque players to really turn that squad around. Yeah, to have a big 3. Otherwise, in my opinion, it's the Celtics. I know that's shocking, but since the All-Star break, they have the
Brad
best.
Stevens just won Coach of the Month for the Eastern Conference.
Since the All-Star break, they've had the best record in the Eastern Conference. That's crazy to consider, considering the lack of talent on that roster. That's a testament to Brad Stevens. And they're going to get a lottery pick this year and continue to build for the future. And I think in a weak Eastern Conference, they can make the playoffs next year for sure. They can make the playoffs now as an 8 seed.
And they're almost in, yeah. I'm going to have to go with my Bucks here. I've been saying them a lot.
They're a 6 seed, though, aren't they?
They're a 6 seed, but I don't think they're even close to a championship at this point.
But they're still sort of contender.
No, I'm telling you. I know what you mean, Holden, they're in. But I just don't. I think they're losing first round, just because I don't see them.
Yeah, I have them losing first round.
But if they had Sanders, my man, if Jabari was healthy, I think they'd be a higher seed and they'd win. But as of right now, I mean,
they still have Brandon Knight. They could make a better run.
Brandon Knight, I like Carter Williams as a long-term option. I mean, look at it. You got Carter Williams next year. Jabari's coming back healthy.
Right.
Greek Freak's only going to get better. Chris Middleton coming off your bench. They're going to get a decent draft pick. Yeah. So I think the Bucks are a team. But look at the Utah Jazz, Holden. We just talked about them. They're one of the best teams in the Western Conference since the All-Star break. I think top 3 as far as record goes. And we mentioned Rudy Gobert having a great second half of the year. Derek Favors is really coming into being the leader of that team.
They have so much talent.
Gordon Hayward has been picking it up.
So much young talent. It's absolutely ridiculous. They just need that one coach who's an excellent coach
to put them over the top.
Say, hey, I know it's a young team, but let me just put up with these kids because with my coaching style and their raw talent, I think they could go somewhere. They just need a coach.
Exactly.
Washington, they just need a coach.
But then you look at Utah Jazz too. They're going to get a lottery pick this year.
Yeah.
They have Exum and Burke as their backcourt for the future.
Gordon
Hayward is a great player this year. Favors is great. Their bench coming off the bench. They got Rodney.
They have a
They have
starting
Hood
5.
coming off the bench.
They just need to build the bench and get a coach.
Yes, they have Hood coming off the bench. They have what's his name? I can't think of his name.
Crazy. I mean, but you had another question, I believe.
Another question, yeah. So, Holden, this is kind of not an off-topic, but it's a little different than normal. But would you rather have 6 guys hitting over 333?
What, are we talking about baseball?
Baseball, okay. MLB, or 4 pitchers with a less than 1 ERA? So basically, would you rather have a dominant offense or a dominant pitching staff? But
I would want a dominant pitching staff.
Well, look at this one. So you'd rather have 4 pitchers with a less than 1 ERA than a?
Because when it comes to the postseason, it's all about defense wins championships.
JPB?
So it's all it's always about defense, and pitching is defense. So you need a legitimate pitching staff. You really only need 3 good pitching staffs for the postseason, but
if you could have 4,
4 is amazing. I definitely think a pitching staff is more important because batters are going to have off nights for you. It doesn't matter if you're batting 333.
You're going to have a bad night.
You're going to have a bad night one of these nights. That's why you're batting 333 and not 700. So you're bound to have nights where you're not going to score a lot of runs, so you need that pitching to pull you through. But obviously we're talking about baseball.
Yeah,
I wanted to get
definitely.
your opinion on Chris Bryant. He has been tearing it up for the Chicago Cubs in spring training, but rumors are that the Chicago Cubs are going to start him in the minors to avoid paying a sum of money, a part of a clause in his contract. So if he plays a certain X amount of games, they have to pay him a certain sum of money. But by starting him in the minors, he won't be able to fulfill that clause, and they'll be avoiding some extra dollars for Chris Bryant. Is this fair or foul?
I think this is personally foul because, look, this kid he's a great player, and he's definitely your future. So why not pay him? I mean, maybe they're thinking, oh, well, we'll pay him down the road when he gets into the league and establishes himself.
It takes forever to get paid in baseball.
It does. I mean, you see guys get drafted out of high school, and you're like, wow, this guy's going to make good money. They're playing minor leagues for 6 years.
Yeah.
And then even then, they're, pinch runners for a team. And then if you let's look at him, for example. The Cubs are trying to maybe move him to the outfield after he's traditionally a third baseman. So that could be another reason. Let's put him down to the minors. He'll still be a great hitter. Move him to the outfield to get some experience, and then we'll move him up here. But I think he definitely deserves the money here, unless the Cubs are like, "Don't worry, son, we'll pay you big money down the road."
Yeah.
But
he's like, "I want that money now."
It is unfortunate for him because he's that close to that payday.
Yeah, I mean, throw him into the fire right now. He's killing it in spring training. Baseball is one of those sports where you need to be confident going into a game. You can't knock down a player's confidence and expect him to perform. So I definitely think with Chris Bryant's confidence at an all-time high, you need to ride him while he's hot, while he's feeling good. Not, send him to the minors, tell him, hey, you're not ready yet, and then he gets, angry and starts to doubt himself. And then finally when you call him up, he doesn't perform like he did in spring training. I definitely think he should start right now. How much, they're avoiding... Obviously, I think it's close to $1 million, but in the minor league where you're paying guys, the average salary is over, $5 million. Like you can afford to spend that kind of money on a talented guy like Chris Bryant.
And another thing is too, the Cubs in some projections were projected to win that division.
Yeah, make a run.
Make a run, possibly get this guy going. Get your they have Castro too, right?
Yeah, they need to sell some tickets. They have him. They have John Lester. They have some pieces.
Yeah.
Like the worst you can do is sell a lot of tickets. Like,
definitely, like
this guy needs,
sell tickets so they could pay him. I mean, I just think you want that young guy to. They want him to be the face of the franchise. I mean, I'm sure Cub fans aren't like mad at the organization because he will be playing for the team this year.
Exactly. But it's kind of like, come on.
And if anything, too, like maybe they don't pay him. Could they use that money for other things? I don't know. But I think the kid, just because of his sheer talent and his potential and the fact that he's going to be the face of your franchise for not decades, but a decade, I think he deserves the money.
Exactly.
And it's tough because he's that close to the money. Exactly. He can literally touch it. He's like a day off.
Right.
So it's tough.
We breezed over this topic and moved right to the Final Four, but I want to come back to this topic because it's a really interesting question. The Clippers and Golden State just played the other night. The Clippers won. Chris Paul got his ankles broken. It was terrible.
Look, Chris Paul is the best.
Every time those two teams play against each other, I watch, and there's always some sort of skirmish. It always gets chippy, and those are like the only few NBA games I will watch because I consider it to be the best rivalry in the NBA right now, the Clippers and Golden State. Just because last year was a 7-game series in the playoffs.
There always seems to be a fight in the games.
There always seems to be a fight. Justin, what's the best rivalry in the NBA for you?
Are we talking today's NBA?
Today's NBA.
Okay, because if we were talking a couple years ago, I'm going Lakers, Celtics.
Yeah.
But
for sure. But
obviously, the Clippers and Golden State is a big one, and I think that very well could be the best. But if you can look at some other rivalries too. I mean, Knicks Nets was somewhat of a rivalry. How about down in Texas? You got Spurs and the Mavericks. That's somewhat of a rivalry down there. I mean, it's not much of a home state pride situation because, you're playing for your state, but it's not really.
Houston.
Houston's there as well. But I got to go with Golden State and the Clippers. It's just, anytime there's a risk, I think there's an opportunity to be a fight almost every game. And the teams, and they both, and they're not fighting because they hate each other. They both want wins.
Exactly. I
definitely think we'll see them in the playoffs because I think they're two great teams.
Exactly.
And I would love to see them in the playoffs again, 7 straight games. But honestly, in the NBA right now, I don't see much like one of those classic Celtics-Lakers rivalries. Like, I just don't really see it this year.
What was great about the NBA in the past was, at any time in like the 80s or 90s, there were multiple rivalries going on at the same time.
And you know what happened with that was?
What?
Every team had a star. There wasn't teams that were getting like the Knicks. There wasn't teams like the Knicks or 76ers. Every team had their own duo or single guy, a star. So every team was relevant.
But I think you think like Lakers, Celtics in the 80s. There was also the Pistons who were feuding with either the Lakers or the Celtics. Pistons, Bulls. Then you think of, the Seattle Supersonics versus the Lakers. I mean, there were just so many good rivalries going on in the same eras, whereas in today's NBA...
How about Malone versus Jordan and Pippen and the Jazz and the Bulls? That was...
And in the NBA for the past few years, it's like one rivalry per year.
And it's not even... I mean, I wouldn't even call it that much of a rivalry.
Like,
it's
this year, I think it's Clippers and Golden State, but I think when LeBron was still in Miami and guys like... Well, really, when Paul Pierce, Garnett, Ray Allen...
The Celtics Heat was a big one.
And Rondo, when those guys were still on the Celtics, it was really... The Celtics had a rivalry with any team with LeBron on it. Whether it be the Cavs or when he went to the Miami, that was a huge rivalry. The Pacers and the Heat had the makings of a huge rivalry.
Until Paul George went down.
And then LeBron left.
Dwayne Wade's been hurt. Sure, that would have been if LeBron had stayed and Paul George hadn't gotten hurt, I think that would have been a great season series this year.
Exactly. And then you look in the West, I think Oklahoma City versus Spurs had a making, but then James Harden left, and it hasn't just been the same level of competitiveness. But the Spurs and Mavericks are always a great matchup.
How about Knicks-Nets? I think when Melo was healthy, there was some little pride over New York.
Knicks-Nets was good like 2 years ago, but considering that both rosters have basically disintegrated, it's not a fun matchup to really watch anymore. But
then you got to look like Timberwolves. They don't have any rivals.
I think Lakers-Clippers is still interesting, even though the Lakers are awful.
If the Lakers had talent, it'd be great. I mean, Staples Center rivalry but I think this season it's definitely Clippers-Warriors, but I wouldn't even call that a real NBA rivalry. I mean, it's
in the same division.
It's a rivalry, but like,
and they could both legitimately be one seeds, but the fact that they play
compared
each other
to
so
previous
often,
rivalries, I would say it's
like they get in fights.
I know what you mean. That's why it's definitely the only rivalry this year. Yeah. But compared to previous ones, I don't think it's as big as a rivalry as previous ones.
But I mean, thinking about free agency this year, the NBA season's almost over. A lot of players are already, out done for the season, basically either from injury or
just rest.
A lot of teams are resting their good players because they don't want to put extra miles on those bodies if they're not going to, win, drive for anything rather than a lottery pick. But some guys getting set for big deals in free agency, Enes Kanter, I think Derek
Kawhi
Favors
Leonard.
up. Yeah, Kawhi Leonard.
LaMarcus Aldridge. Marc Gasol.
Yeah, I mean, who is the one guy you want on your team from free agency?
This one, I would want LaMarcus Aldridge, but he's going to stay with Portland.
Yeah,
so
they built a good situation for him.
Yeah, so as far as a guy, and he said he wants to retire as a Blazer, be the best Blazer of all time, and yeah, they've had a great situation there.
I'd rather play with Damian Lillard
than a guy in the Knicks, like Shane Larkin, let's say. But
have Damian Lillard for like the next 5 to 8 years.
But what I'm interested to see
is
like
3.
Exactly true. Melo's not going to last that much longer, and Lillard will be there for a while. But what I'm interested to see is the Knicks are very interested in getting Marc Gasol. But let's say they get the first pick in the draft. Are they going to take Okafor and put him at the 4? I don't think he's undersized for a center in the league, but he's got the moves to play center, and I think he's better suited playing center. But I think he could possibly move to the 4.
Yeah.
But it would be tough. Do you want to go with Gasol?
The Knicks are interesting because I think their entire free agency, sort of watch list or priority list or how they go about free agency and the moves they make is predicated upon their draft pick. If they get the first overall pick or number 2, they're taking a big man. And once you take a big man, Marc Gasol is off the board. You're not going to pay him. He's 30 years old, and you don't need him. They're going to probably go hard for a guy like Rondo,
Leonard,
or someone that can play alongside Melo and Jaleel at the same time.
But I think if you got Jaleel and Melo on your team, you can't get a point guard who wants to shoot. You need a guy who's going to pass.
Rondo.
But as far as the Knicks go, let's say they get Marc Gasol. They could not necessarily draft Okafor even if they get the first pick, which is, according to Jeremy, the draft is rigged. So I'm pretty sure they're getting the first pick if it rigged. Why else wouldn't they? They're the Knicks. But let's say they get the third pick and Gasol decides, I'll come to New York. There's some quality guards in this draft in Moutier, who was before the March Madness started, was the number one pick in the draft ladder and mock drafts, and D'Angelo Russell on Ohio State, who had a great tournament and had a good season overall.
By the third pick, Towns and Jaleel are going to be gone.
They'll be gone.
So now you have to take a guard. So you're going to take either D'Angelo Russell or Moutier. Then you can go get Gasol in free agency.
I think so.
Gasol would want to stay.
Well, technically,
in Memphis.
LeBron's a free agent this year.
Yeah, but he's not going to play for New York. He wants to stay in Cleveland. He only did the 2-year deal because.
But there's an option on his contract. He could opt out and go to New York if he wants.
I think he negotiated that because he's a savvy businessman, and a new TV deal for the NBA will kick in next season for Cleveland, increase the salary cap for Cleveland, so LeBron can renegotiate and get a new max contract.
LeBron will be with that organization for his life. I think he could be like a president.
I'm sure he'd want to be a front office executive. Yeah,
definitely be a part. Or maybe own the Cavs.
Yeah, maybe have part ownership. I definitely think that's a possibility. But I definitely think with LeBron, he did that 2-year deal for a reason because he wants to see how much the salary cap goes up, and he'll negotiate a new contract with Cleveland.
But as far as Enes Kanter goes, as you mentioned earlier in the show,
I totally forgot Kevin Love could be a free agent.
Right, and Kevin Love,
now,
I think will definitely.
He negotiated in principle to sign long-term with the Cavs, but we saw
set in paper.
We saw Dwight Howard do the same thing when he was traded to LA. Sort of agree, hey, we're moving for you. You're going to negotiate with us long-term, and he was like, nah, see, I'm going to Houston. So Kevin Love could possibly.
Kevin Love, I think he'll definitely leave Cleveland. He's suffering severe Chris Bosh syndrome, and the numbers he's putting up, 18 and 10, are great numbers. Yeah. And most players would kill to have some of those numbers, but not for a guy who averaged 26 13, and 4 last year.
Yeah, for a guy that's so used to getting the ball as much as he does.
Yeah.
He's not like Chris Bosh.
He's spotting up shooting threes.
I think that's why Chris Bosh should be, commended for those years in Miami with LeBron, because he was a 24-12 guy in Toronto, and he never complained once from his lack of touches and how precipitously his numbers dropped.
And look how they went up when LeBron leaves. Oh.
Right. And now he's got his numbers back, but he doesn't seem as happy because they're not winning. Whereas Kevin Love, honestly, I think he wants to win, but he was so used to being the number one guy, and he's not learning to sort of swallow his pride.
So I think the Lakers is a good move for him, because even if Kobe's there next year and maybe he doesn't get as much touches, Kobe's not lasting more than a year or two after this.
I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast the other day, and he was like, Rondo's going to the Lakers. Like, it's done. Like, Dallas is a mess right now. He's only averaging like 20 minutes a game, getting in arguments with the coach, averaging mediocre numbers. Doesn't get to be the type of player he was in Boston. Doesn't really put in effort on the defensive end of the floor anymore.
I'll tell you right now, he used to.
His first 5 years in the league,
when he was with the Celtics,
all-star.
Oh yeah,
his roles were defend and get other people the basketball.
Oh.
And he did both amazing. Like, he was all-pro defensive team.
Rondo
2 years in a row.
Rondo still can play defense.
Yeah,
I think he just doesn't have much motivation anymore. And I think the Mavericks, when the playoffs start, I think he'll pick it up.
2 steals a game. He was an animal on both ends of the floor. And now you just see in Dallas, he just doesn't give. He's like James Harden. He just doesn't want to defend it.
I think it's that combination of him and Ellis, because Ellis is the type of guy who, sure, he's a shooting guard, but he likes to carry the ball up and run the offense through him. Rondo, he's not creating his own shot.
Right.
He's not coming off screens and shooting. He's really known for his passing, and he's good at driving into the hole and hitting layups and getting fouled. And he can't do that playing on the wing.
He's not a shooter. Not really great from the free throw line. Not great not great field goal percentage, and he's not a great 3-point shooter. Like you said, he's good at driving and dishing and playing defense. And
he's not able to do that.
Disinterested because in Dallas he has to play off the ball.
Especially in the fourth quarter.
He has to play off the ball, and he's never played off the ball in his career. In Boston, he always had the ball.
And he had Ray Allen next to him.
Yeah, he always had the ball.
Because Ray Allen's not carrying the ball.
He had spot-up guys all around him, so it was all about him having the ball, dribble, get it to other people. Whereas now he's got to learn how to play without the ball, because Dirk and Monte, they create their own shots.
That's why I think the Lakers would work well for him, or the Knicks, because
I think the Lakers are done. I mean, Kobe and him had breakfast at that diner or whatever.
Well, think even Kobe too. Kobe
Kobe can play off the ball.
Kobe could handle the ball, but he's not like Ellis where he needs the ball in his hands.
Right.
Maybe in the fourth quarter you give Kobe the ball. Sure, Kobe's getting the ball. But in the first three and the beginning of the fourth, I think
Rondo would be happy with hockey assists to Kobe. Like, all right, here, Kobe in the post.
Yeah.
All right, go to work. I think he'd be happy with that. But I think when Kobe and Rondo met in that diner, I think it was done.
You think they?
I want my max money.
You want me on the team?
LA would be a great situation, and Kobe and I have
maybe they can grab Love too,
right?
And have a big three out west.
And Kobe and him have similar personalities. You don't really hear about them socializing with other players in the league. They really tend to stick to their family lives and playing basketball. I think it'd be a great fit. I just think if they get him, Kobe comes back healthy, Julius Randle, a lottery pick, they could probably be an 8 seed. I don't think they could be a legitimate contender.
Exactly. I mean,
they could send Kobe out the right way.
Definitely. I think Rondo and Love heading over to there would be great. The only thing is, the Lakers want to sign Westbrook if they can in a couple years. And if they have Rondo there, I mean, unless they trade somebody.
Westbrook stays in OKC.
I don't know. Westbrook, if Durant leaves, do you think Westbrook...
I don't think Durant's leaving because Durant just stated to the media the other day, I want to spend my career in OKC.
Who knows?
Is that binding?
Yeah.
You hope it is. A guy like Kevin Durant, he's really not known to, switch back and forth on his opinions, but...
I think another thing is too. Look what Washington's been doing. Do you think he wants to look? I mean, when they were winning, coincidentally, he's like the rumors came out. Durant's going to Washington. He's going home. Now they're struggling, which we talked about last show, and he doesn't want to go anymore.
I don't think Kevin Durant wants to leave on a sour note. He wants to leave, giving OKC all they had. So
he's not leaving this year. But let's say they win a championship next year. Is he just going to walk out after a ring?
Well, he's out for the rest of the year. So
he's out for this year. I think the only way he leaves is if, for some reason, like say Westbrook gets hurt and the team doesn't even make the playoffs, or they get knocked out in the second round. I think he leaves. But if they win a title next year, make it to the finals, both of them playing, maybe wins an MVP, I think he stays.
Exactly. I think if all the chips fall right, I think you don't walk away from a situation with two talented players like Ibaka and Russell Westbrook, and if Enes Kanter re-signs, there's just so much talent
Waiters there. Is there.
Yeah, Dion Waiters. I think they should just move him immediately.
You don't like Dion Waiters?
Dion Waiters thinks he's Kobe Bryant. Literally, he's like, I'm the best player on this team. I can do whatever I want. I can jack up as many shots as I want.
When in actuality...
And you can't check me. When in actuality, he's got, the talent level of, Dion Waiters. He's not good. He's averaging 11 points a game.
He's a solid player. But he's no Kobe. He's not the best scorer on the team. Right. And on the Thunder, Westbrook's getting the ball in the finals and in the final minute. Or Durant. Definitely not Dion Waiters. And I'd almost rather give the ball to Anthony Morrow than Dion Waiters.
Honestly, I don't want Dion Waiters on that team because now I learned... Because I was like, this guy's like a poor man's James Harden. He can come off your bench and facilitate your offense and give you buckets while your stars are sitting. Now I know why this guy was kicked out of Cleveland because it's not talent. That's the question. It's his mind. He
needs to go to the 76ers where he could just jack up as many shots as he wants.
He needs to be on a bad team. That's the perfect situation for him. Because
what's a bad team?
He's just not. He doesn't have that mindset for a contender team. Well, that's all we have for this edition of Sports Talk. I'm Julian Pirelli.
And I'm Justin Palillo.
We'll see you next time.